Thanks for joining our webinar, Monitoring Off-Grid Solar Systems with Morningstar and Zabbix. This is Mark McHenry. I'll be moderating the webinar. And before we start, all attendees are reminded that you can text any questions that you might have into the questions chat box on your GoToWebinar console. We'll address your questions at the end as time permits. If we can't get to your questions during this webinar, we will respond by email. Also, please note we are recording this broadcast and we will email you the recording tomorrow. We've also included a copy of our slide deck and the Zabbix SNMP user guide in the handout section of your GoToWebinar page, so you can go ahead and download them now. And with that said, let me introduce today's speakers. So from Zabbix, we have Sergey Sorokin, Business Development Director. And from Morningstar, we have Brad Burwald, Senior Product Manager. Brad, I'm going to let you take over and take us through the agenda and start the presentation.
Okay, thanks very much, Mark. Really, I appreciate all of our attendees for joining us today. And of course, a big thanks to Sergey and all of the technology team at Zabbix for working with us in partnership to make a lot of this integration possible. Our customers have been quite excited about it, and we want to do all we can to expand use of data into a lot of different markets. And Zabbix really helps enable that. So we're very appreciative of that. Also, a big thanks to Nam Lee, who is the product lead on the SNMP program at Morningstar and has done a lot of the technical integration work and presentation materials. So thanks very much, Nam. So to get started, just have a bit of a brief agenda there on what we'll be covering about the company, the needs of remote monitoring, and a little bit about our devices. We'll be shifting over to Zabbix presentation from Sergey, who will be covering a little bit about their company and the technology and all the deployment options, because of course getting the software deployed, installed, and configured is something that's become easier over the years. And now with a lot of the cloud options that are available, Zabbix has taken a big opportunity to utilize those technologies to make it even easier to deploy these systems so that you can monitor many thousands of devices. So we'll cover that a little bit, as well as some solution case studies. And lastly, any kind of support questions you have for either Morningstar or Zabbix on how you can get support and get your questions answered. So hopefully we'll cover everything. And then, of course, do some questions and answers at the end of the presentation. Okay, so with that, I'll get started. A little bit about Morningstar. We have over 4 million products in the deployed around the world since our company's inception in 1993. And we are the leading supplier of solar charge controllers with a specific focus in off-grid and remote power systems. We have products in over 100 countries and have distributing partners all around the world. And some of the markets that we sell into are residential and rural electrification. These would be, home systems, as well as countries where there is no grid access. So we're doing a lot to get small solar home systems deployed in those countries. And one such notable project was an off-grid installation for over 200,000 systems in Peru for homes, as well as 3,000 community centers, which featured a mix of DC and even AC voltage supplied for medical and IT use. And combined, over 1 million people benefited from this power where there previously was none. So we really are proud of that project. We do a lot of commercial installations for business as well. And industrial is a specific focus and a key topic for this presentation today in the telecom, oil, gas, and security industries. Also, the mobile and marine markets, also big users of low voltage DC systems and therefore solar for remote power and basically when you want to get away. And RV has been a very popular topic this year, with many people escaping the boredom of their homes and staying safe in their RV or boat. So lots of opportunities. Morningstar thinks of ourselves as the charging experts, and we've got a very wide and diverse product line that covers a lot of needs. You'll find that a lot of our products are very application specific. They cover these applications, and the feature set that they actually have is really unique for what that usage is. For instance, dual battery charging for RVs, or communications protocols for telecom, or in the case of lighting systems, built-in lighting control system. So you can see some of the many solar applications here that Morningstar supports, both home and industrial. Some specific examples in the telecom world: we are working closely with providing hybrid, which could be genset combined with solar for powering cellular base stations, backhaul links to bring internet connectivity, often through wireless or fiber, to the world, land mobile radio applications, and most notably in the last couple of years, some great gains have been made in satellite technology, including lower latency and higher speeds, so that really between solar energy and satellite, there's really not any part of the world that can't be reached with data and power if we're really meaning to do so. So that's very exciting. The oil gas industry, while collecting gas and petroleum, utilizes solar in a lot of off-grid applications, many of those with industrial and hazardous location ratings right on the pipeline. So they work in synergy. And as I mentioned, the small home and solar home system rural electrification market is also one that we've served with our partner Tosi Green of Italy. So some of the challenges with remotely monitoring solar power solutions is that the uptime is critical. You've got a communications link which many people are relying on, and it's something that the uptime is really important for, because if you lose that link and you lose power to the radio, then dozens, maybe hundreds or more customers are actually feeling the impact of that. So what monitoring these sites can achieve is we can get greater uptime. We can minimize truck rolls or site visits, which are expensive and often very difficult because of the nature of the location of these systems. It can also speed up installation time, and overall maintenance cost is reduced. And what we're trying to really bring to the market with this is, since SNMP and network management systems are often used to monitor these networks already, having the data available to that same software and server platform for the solar controllers and the solar energy system allows you to monitor everything with one tool. And that tool in this example is Zabbix's very powerful network management system. So by integrating SNMP, we combine so you get a single dashboard and can see all of your critical operating data. A little bit about the ways which our products can communicate. Our EMC adapter is used with the majority of our product line, which is data enabled and gives you the ability to add SNMP functionality, as well as a simple web interface that can be viewed on one device if you just want to see what's happening on that device as well. And we also support Modbus, which is an open protocol used by the energy, automation, and oil and gas industry to also collect data. But during this presentation, we're focusing specifically on simple network management protocol and a lot of the benefits that can be gained by integrating with Zabbix. Okay. So our ecosystem of products includes a variety of equipment that is rated for low voltage DC at as simple as 12 volts, or as high as 3,000 kilowatts of power at 600 volts DC for our high voltage TriStar MPPT controller. And then we've got a little mix of everything in between. And all of these products are SNMP compatible, and they are enabled for SNMP using the EMC1 adapter, which is shown in the middle of the photo there. And you can see that the enabled product, the one that actually runs the SNMP agent, is the EMC1. So that's got the processor and the communications capabilities and the Ethernet link to provide that. And then it connects to all of the products seen on the screen here to give them the ability to be pulled via SNMP. Okay, so that's a brief overview of Morningstar and what we're bringing to the market with our products. Now I'd like to turn the presentation over to Sergey Sorokin, who's joining us from Zabbix, and he'll talk a little bit about his company and what he is doing in IT and network monitoring. Okay, Sergey, thank you.
Thank you, Brad. It's really a pleasure to be here together with your company, with you on this webinar and present our solution. So I will talk a bit about our company, about our services, our vision, and so on. So just to make it easier for you to understand what is Zabbix, where we are aiming, and what should you expect from us. Next slide, if possible. Oh, okay. So I think that slide is still for Brad, right?
Brad needs to take himself off mute.
Thanks. A little bit more about our partner software program before Sergey gets started is Zabbix is a partner of ours. That means that we work with them to provide templates and integration software that's pre-configured and available for download on our website. And through this partnership program, we have all of the configuration and software worked out, and we've worked closely with their professional team to make sure that everything is all integrated, so you can just download, install, and deploy Zabbix and take it away. So that partnership program brings a lot of the simplicity to the market so that you can get up and running very quickly. And then with that, we're working with Zabbix, and then I'll give Sergey a chance to do an introduction here about his product. Thanks.
Thank you. So let's start with what is Zabbix. Zabbix is actually a universal monitoring solution. So it's not only about SNMP, it's, let's say, many of different ways of collecting data. SNMP is one of the very important ways. So in few words, what Zabbix actually does, we collect data, we analyze this data, we store this data for later historical reuse. Let's say, analyze this data against triggers. And if we see that something is over or below, then actually we do some action. So the action could be that we will notify you about problem. We can visualize this information. We can actually act if that is required from Zabbix. So and if we're talking about the purpose of the monitoring, definitely it's known to everybody, but it's just first to understand what's going on in your infrastructure. It is to prevent potential, let's say, situations where you'll have either performance or availability issues. And of course, because we're talking about infrastructures becoming more and more complex, it is very important to correlate, let's say, different events happening both from maybe your network and from your underlying, let's say, physical devices, both IT and, let's say, related to the power supply and to the network supply. So Zabbix is capable of doing all of this all together and providing you the overall picture of your environment. Next slide. So if you would ask what Zabbix is aiming for as a solution, as a company, then it's important to understand that Zabbix is producing open source software, which means that there is no limit in terms of, let's say, buying licenses, let's say, getting let's say, contracts signed just in order to get the software. So software is free, available. What is very important as an add-on to that is that we try to make this software as flexible as possible. So the structure of the data, the way we, let's say, analyze and process the data allows you to make a very kind of complex decisions about your infrastructure and create very kind of a complex rules. At the same time, of course, it can be very simple. And I'll talk about that much later. So we focus on being secure, which means that communication between different components of Zabbix and the devices that we monitor can be completely secured for the different protocols, and it's very important for us, right? Zabbix is scalable. Just to mention that one of our biggest customers is monitoring over 400,000 devices with just a single Zabbix server, right? And our goal is to make it easy. Regardless of the fact how complex the Zabbix itself can be, so that the software itself isn't easy to manage, is easy to understand, and easy to start with. Next slide. And just talking about Zabbix company, right now, our company, I think, is 16 years old, right? The project actually is more than 20 years old. The company is above 100 people, located in several offices. The main one is located in Europe, while we have branches in Japan, in United States, in Russia, and now in Brazil. And we are working actively with our customers through more than 200 partners located on actually all the continents and across many, many countries. Next slide. And let's say some very important advantages of Zabbix. As I have already mentioned, Zabbix is open source, and we are what is called a true open source. So there is no corporate version of Zabbix. There is no limitation whenever you take our open source software. So whether you're trained to monitor 10 metrics or 10 million metrics, it is the same software. You don't really need to buy any licenses, right? There is no fees. You can deploy Zabbix anywhere. You can deploy it on premises. You can deploy it on your Raspberry Pi. You can go into the cloud. You can find containers for Zabbix. So everything. And what is important is that it's not a SaaS solution. So you own it. You own everything. So if you collect data, you want to reuse this data to migrate from, let's say, Zabbix to another solution or from another solution to Zabbix. So there is no limitation, right? And so Zabbix is just easy to start with. Next slide. And when we're talking about, let's say, Zabbix business and being open source, what we do as a company is actually one part, we are creating this software, we are developing this software constantly. At the same time, we're providing commercial services. And commercial services are kind of all built around our customers. And they start from maybe just initial consulting about use of Zabbix. We have technical support contracts, we have training, we have, let's say, template development for any devices, and so on. So if the customer is in need for any kind of assistance from the Zabbix, we are here to provide this assistance and make our customers feel comfortable. Yep. Thank you.
Appreciated that very much. So back to a little bit about the monitoring tool after we've heard about Zabbix and the company and their methods of getting the product to market and how they support. And the open source is something that's been in great demand from a lot of the customers we worked with as well, because as you mentioned, Raspberry Pis and other type of low-end computing devices that can still run this software. They want to integrate around that. They want to build it into their systems, and it could be hardware of choice even for OEMs. So we're glad to be able to support that with them. So a little bit about how Morningstar is actually using the software to manage these systems. As you can see from some of the dashboards and what I'll be covering here, there's a great deal of functionality of data, both in tables and reports, notification systems, and visual data that can actually give you insight into what the system is doing. Okay, so when the EMC is paired with a Morningstar product, you get native support for SNMP. Okay, so we're using the standard protocol. You get visibility of the powered system, so you can look at a very large environment and look at a single view of one product, or you can look across hundreds of sites, even having them proactively notify you if there's any that are in need of support or any kind of remedy that has to be taken place to bring them back to operational status. Because when you scale to this size, you have so many devices, you can't proactively go to them. They generally have to be monitored and report back to you so that you know where to focus your time. We've done several installations of 1,500 sites or more for a single customer in a certain application spread across a very wide geographic area, and it's really the only way to manage. The visibility, of course, of the data is there. Dedicated templates are provided to support the devices. So each of these products we've gone over has a template that we'll show the installation of a little bit later, so that you can choose a ProStar PPT, choose a TriStar PPT, and then use the template that's been pre-configured and easily imported into the software. It can really accelerate troubleshooting, because when you've got a lengthy amount of time series data, meaning time-stamped information over the past week, the month, the year, maybe multiple years, where you can look at the same point in time, because the life of off-grid systems is so long, you can really learn a lot and get great insights into the trends and the performance, or in some cases, the degradation of performance over time, so that you can actually take action to keep the system healthy and running. So with advanced and custom alerting that's also built into Zabbix's software, you can get notifications through a variety of methods: SMS, email, syslog entries, all of the IT needs that you have could be met. Moving on. So getting started with Zabbix, there's several different deployment options. There is, of course, the web server itself that actually displays the information of the dashboard. There is the Zabbix server, which actually is doing the collection of the information and pulling all of these sites. As Sergey had said, it can be scaled from 10 to many millions of devices. And then, of course, there's a database. And if you're familiar with any standard database structure, that is used to actually store the data so that it can be indexed, it can be retrieved quickly, that the IT responsiveness is there. And that gives you a little bit of an idea about the architecture. So you have the front end, you have the server, and you have the database itself. And a lot of the benefits of this is, of course, you can install on premise, meaning in your office, within your network, maybe with a connection to the internet, maybe on a private network or a VPN. You can also then own all the data and store it. It can be integrated with third-party solutions. That database is yours, the data is yours, and all the integration possibilities that come with it are available. So as Sergey had said, it's not a software as a service where you log in and the data is collected by the company itself. You have control over that data. And a lot of the deployment options, because we're speaking to multiple members of our audience here that represent both Zabbix's customers as well as Morningstar's, and they have different backgrounds, but they both have a common need in collecting data. And with that comes some IT needs, but generally it's easier and easier to deploy these systems because of what's offered in the cloud. So we just wanted to give a brief example. In the case of a package for Zabbix, it's like any other installation. It's installed on a Windows machine or even possibly Linux, and the software installation takes place on your own server. So you install it, configure it, link it with the database of your choice, and you're off and running. Requires a little more IT expertise, but generally has all the power and capability if you are a user that wants access to the underlying operating system. If you want an easier way to deploy the system and you wanted to deploy a cloud image, of course, AWS, as well as many other infrastructure as a service systems, can provide machine images. So you've got a pre-configured machine with operating system, and of course, with Zabbix providing the software on top of that, and those are coming from the cloud, and they already have connectivity, the database linkage, the bandwidth, and that's an easy way to deploy as a infrastructure as a service, and usually pennies per operating hour or storage by gigabyte is easily affordable, and you pay for what you use, which is what a lot of people prefer. Taking that a step down even further is if you don't even want to manage the operating system or the infrastructure, you can see container services if you're familiar with Docker, or applications like Kubernetes that are using just the runtime for the software. You don't even have a Windows environment underneath. You can just run it directly in the container, and that makes it even more nimble or easily deployed if you want to replicate that. And then lastly is if you did want to use something like VMware or Hyper-V as a hypervisor to deploy a virtual machine, you can download a system in a box. It comes in a file and you deploy it, you load it, and you open it up, and it runs just as if you installed it. And that can also be used easily on premise. So variety of options here, and all of them, if you explore Zabbix's website, you'll see software choices, operating systems, databases, Postgres, MySQL, you name it. So getting started with Zabbix, if you look on the support site, all of this has been pre-done in their project repositories. They've already got all of the templates positioned for Morningstar products, so you can navigate through those repositories. If you already have your Zabbix installation installed, you can then download the templates for the product you're using, such as the ProStar MPPT that's featured on the screen there. And there are two different types of configuration files. If you are deploying the latest version of Zabbix 5.2 or higher, there is a YAML file that is easily human readable configuration file that will do all the settings for communicating with the Morningstar products. And for previous versions of Zabbix, version 5.0, there is an XML file, which is a very similar type of file for configuration. So those can be downloaded, unzipped, and extracted, and then loaded into Zabbix. And we do have guidelines there. And you can see there is the template that is easily embedded in the zip file. And then once you download that zip file, when you go to the actual Zabbix dashboard, you just go to templates and you go to import, and you import that file into Zabbix, and you're ready to go. So a lot of the work of the scaling, the MIB maps, everything has already been pre-configured, and these import files are not raw, but they're created by Zabbix for this application. So they should be ready to go. Okay, so that's a bit of an overview of deployment options and how Morningstar works there. What I will do now is hand the demo over for some detailed screenshots from Sergey, and you can then get an idea of what kind of information is available from the tool.
Yeah, as Brad has mentioned, is actually that these templates and this connectivity and integration between Zabbix and Morningstar is created in cooperation between two vendors. So from one side, we put in those let's say templates all of our experience, and from another side, Morningstar experts have given us all the details. Let's say when to react, or let's say for how to react and what actually to monitor. This is very important, and thank you a lot, Morningstar, for doing this project together with us. So as you are looking at the demo, I would start with just a list of the hosts. The host in Zabbix term is let's say, for the simplicity, let's call it device, right? So here I'm not sure, maybe it's too small, but we are looking at ProStar and PPT, right? So this is the device that we are willing to monitor. So what we are going to do is we are going to apply the template, and if we can jump on the next slide. So after you import template into the Zabbix. So this is the list of the templates that you actually have. All you need to do is actually to apply this template for the device that you want to monitor. So basically, you kind of link a template, which is a set of rules of how to monitor a particular device, with the device that you want to monitor. For those more advanced in Zabbix, of course, you can do, let's say, a bit of automation here. So, and discover potential, let's say, devices of your interest and link them automatically to the particular templates. But for the simplicity, you can always say, okay, this particular host, this particular device is being monitored by this template. As you might see on the screen, each template contains several kind of setups. And if we navigate to the next slide, you'll see the list of items. Items, again, if we talk in general language, it's a list of metrics. So this is what actually Zabbix will be collecting about each device that we put on monitoring. And again, here you would see like this list of devices. You would see the interval that we put as a default. It means that you can always change it within the template for all of your devices or on particular device. And interval can be set as minimum as to 1 second. And then you can go as whatever, 1 week, 1 month, 1 year. So it's up to you. And then you also, of course, set up for how long you would like to store, let's say, the history, raw data. And then there is what we call trends. It's for how long you want to store the average data. And as Brad was mentioning, this data, historical data, will allow you actually to move from this kind of a preventing monitoring, or let's say real-time monitoring, to looking into the historical data and understanding, okay, now I have this particular value. Is it decreasing, increasing over the time? Do I need to take any action? And then if we move on the next slide, you would see actually how, let's say, those items metrics are built. So here you will have the list of the metrics and the values. It's important, again, to understand that this was already all pre-built in cooperation between Zabbix and Morningstar. You don't really need to do anything when you initially set up Zabbix. However, later, if you want to, let's say, change any parameters, you can easily do that through the web interface. And it's all readable. It's all pretty clear on how it must be configured or how you can change the data. And then if we advance to the next slide, let's say in the previous slides, we have configured everything. So we decided which particular host or device is being monitored by which template. And now we already go on the dashboard. And here what we can see that, let's say, this is a pretty primitive dashboard, but here we can see the status of our environment, what's going on. And here you can see a timeline. It's just one of the elements of the dashboard. And you can see, okay, that's what's happening with one particular device, for how long it's happening, whether anybody acknowledged that he's working on that, and whether any actions were taken about this particular problem, and the level of severity of the problem, whether it's something simple or it's something that we really need to react. And of course, there are many other elements, but that's just kind of a simple dashboard that you can use to see the situation with your environment. And if we jump on the next slide, let's say you can always move into the particular device and see the current situation, the current metrics of the device. So here you would see, let's say, charge state, charge, let's say we have night. I'm sorry, I'm not that professional in Morningstar devices, but I would expect, since that was at 10 in the morning European time, most likely the device is located somewhere in the United States, and that's definitely a kind of a dark part of the day. And we see other metrics as well. However, this is what we call the latest data. So this is the last metrics arrived into the system. And if we switch to the next slide, we can see, let's say, the same host that we saw on the first slide in configuration. This one is already more in the, let's say, overview. So here we would see each host, whether it has any problems, let's say, by severity here, whether monitoring is enabled. And then, as you may see here, we, next to each device, will have a graph, right? So graphs are actually kind of a part of the template. They're pre-built. You don't really need to configure simple graphs. They just come together with your data. So it's just, and if we switch to the next slide, you would actually see that historical data being visualized on the graphs. So it's as again Brad has mentioned, it's pretty easy right now. I think this data is just for the last 3 hours, but you can actually get this data from the very beginning as you started monitoring your devices. And it could be for one day, it could be for 1 week, or maybe for a whole year, right? And based on this information, you can definitely make some wise decisions about, let's say, your infrastructure. What is important, the same graphs, they can be actually kind of, let's say, put together different metrics on the same graphs, so you can even visually correlate, let's say, different events or different, let's say, values, and understand dependencies between, let's say, very different metrics that you collect. I think that's it for my presentation.
Thank you very much, Sergey. One of the things I could kind of speak to here, because we've got the graph up as we transition to the next section, is, when you get the granularity of data that's enabled by this system across all these devices, there's a considerable amount of insight that you can gain from that. So it takes understanding, the off-grid systems and what the expected behavior is, and then the ability to capture all of that through, remote communications. So, for instance, if you look at these graphs over a week, a month, a year, or many years, the things that will start to come out of that data is, you can see a battery age over many years and when it's getting ready for replacement. If you start seeing events or thresholds that are being crossed, such as low battery alarms or load disconnects, which means your site is having trouble staying operational, you can start to anticipate, a battery replacement. If you can see temperatures during a certain period in a certain region rise above 50 C within the cabinet, you're going to know that you've got some high temperature issues that may affect the operation of the equipment. If you see that you have 20 sites in pretty much the same area, but one of them is reading a lot of anomalous data that's completely different from the rest of the sites, but everything else is expected to be the same. Why is that unit standing out amongst the others, amongst its peers, and not performing? Because there'd be damage to a module. Is there a battery cell failure? Something is different about that. And you'll see that those pieces of information start to jump out when you've got all of this data available to you. So it's extremely powerful. Okay, so moving on. What I wanted to talk a little bit about was some of the solutions, because when you see all this and you say, okay, I get how I can use this, but I use a different system than a dealer that installs residential or a security application or telecommunications. There's a lot of variety of applications, and I just wanted to touch briefly on a few. There's a lot of text here. I'll just talk lightly about what we're looking at, just to give some real world examples of applications where this data can be put to use. Okay, so in the first one, if you have a traffic application and you've got remote video monitoring, you often will see these solar powered trailers deployed at a construction site. They're not there permanently, but they're usually there for many weeks or months during the construction activity. And a lot of times they can be 4G monitored, but they may be on a private network. And these need to be monitored for safety, for traffic, to look for traffic incidents, maybe to manage the timeline of the schedule of the work that's being done. And these can be connected to an IP-based video camera system, which can be monitored with SNMP. When you have the ability to monitor a controller, maybe like a ProStar MPPT that's inside of this equipment, then you'll be able to look for problems in the system. And the reason this can be critical is a lot of equipment on the roadways, they often will link one site to the next down the highway. And it can be really important if you've got a bottleneck or you break a link in the chain that you're alerted to any problems that may come up. So an example here of where a ProStar can be used in traffic monitoring with SNMP to monitor both the data for the IP-based cameras for security and safety, as well as the power system. It's even common to see these solar arrays are not deployed correctly. They're movable and they're sometimes put in shading, or they're pointed in the wrong direction, so they're not facing south. And these things can be detected early and taken care of. Another example in the SCADA petroleum monitoring application, where we've got something like a petroleum pump jack or other application. There's a lot of extremely expensive assets that are at stake. They're being transported. There's a little bit of a hazardous environment that has to be monitored to prevent fire or chance of explosion. And a lot of equipment has been deployed for these automation systems. And these generally can be monitored with 4G more likely, because the oil field is gradually transitioning from serial and log data over to IP-based traffic, because it's easier and they have network management systems that keep track of both the safety and the data. So when these systems are deployed with cellular connections and solar, you can get a very expensive asset such as this pump jack monitored with just a simple solar application. And that allows them to track the generator usage that's powering it, if there's any downtime, because they quickly want to make sure they're meeting their production goals and the equipment is operational due its capital expense. And that can be handled with, in this case, it looks like just about 100-watt PV module. And that's enabled with data monitoring, either Modbus or SNMP. Another example is the wireless ISP services, such as the infrastructure that's being deployed to rural America and around the world, because especially now during the COVID era, we're seeing connectivity is absolutely critical for, of course, commerce, communication, and more recently this year for education, as a lot of schools move towards virtual programs. So these rural broadband initiatives are extremely important to get connectivity out there to customers that need it. And as you can see, a lot of times these applications are built by smaller integrators. This isn't necessarily a large network carrier deploying that, and they need management in place because they own the network. So in this example, there was an island system, a couple hundred customers on an island that were getting connectivity from a point-to-point wireless link, like many of the cellular towers use. And this system is actually monitored and powered by solar applications. So a product like our TriStar MPPT can be deployed at this site in the power shed, and they can monitor both the solar energy, production, battery health, and load status of the power equipment, as well as monitoring the network connectivity. Because there's a lot happening in this location, they're using it as both the link to the mainland because of its ideal location and altitude here of the tower, as well as providing service with those sector antennas to connect homes that are all around the island. So it works as a bit of a mesh. And if you lose this backbone, you lose connectivity for maybe dozens or hundreds of homes that are on the island. So monitoring with SNMP is both critical from the network standpoint as well as the power of the solar system. And then a specific application that Morningstar took part of was a really unique application for solar powered seismic monitoring. So these were basically a USGS program in project coordination with the University of Washington to deploy about 400 seismic monitoring sites. And just a little bit of solar power can keep them connected and online using wireless telemetry. And in this case, it's a really critical application because they're doing research for detecting seismic activity. So it requires precision instrumentation, and they need to be connected at all times. And if there's an earthquake, they want to know about it, so they're going to stay connected. And SNMP was chosen as a great application that they could deploy at scale with our SunSaver MPPT and the EMC1, and they were monitoring over 400 sites across the Pacific Northwest. So really, really great application. So those are just some of the example solutions I wanted to talk about. And then what I'll just do is kind of one final coverage here. Morningstar has other software products that are available for free on our website. Morningstar's MSView software is just a PC-based utility that's very simple for loading custom set points and doing a little bit of connectivity with a controller using either a local serial link or an IP connection. And Morningstar also has something called LiveView, which is a web-based application that runs right out of the EMC1, similar to the web pages you would use to set up your home router or Wi-Fi. And that gives you a simple dashboard. Those tools are available, they're embedded in the products, and they're free to use. But when you get to the point where you have to scale to a very sizable number of systems, you'll find that going to a server-based and data-based application such as Zabbix offers is really the best solution, because you need scale, you need proactive monitoring. You can't use a PC to be connected all the time. You need a server to do that work, and Zabbix does an excellent job of providing this connectivity with SNMP and a lot of these real-time metrics. And also the data storage capabilities are much greater. And when you start handling hundreds or thousands of requests, very often you need to to properly organize that data. So that's some of the capabilities. We offer these software tools, but we just wanted to give an overview of when customers appreciate the capabilities of the software, but they need to move to something more sophisticated and professional. An NMS is an excellent option. So just wanted to point out a few Zabbix resources. If you look in the handouts of the presentation today, you'll see PDF versions of a lot of this documentation, and you can follow these links here to look at a user guide for Morningstar devices. Of course, get you to the download and installation pages. It's free to download, as Sergey had said. We've done some videos on integrating the Zabbix server. All of our SNMP templates are readily available. And as Sergey said, a lot of what they do is support an open source deployment of their software, but they do offer paid, in some cases, training courses to get you up to speed on all the capabilities, as well as technical support. So he can provide more information, and you can see that on Zabbix's website as well. Okay, so that's the end of the presentation. And in summary, we have been a global leader for a lot of these types of systems for many years, and we appreciate working with Zabbix, the culmination of quite a bit of work to be able to offer this to customers. And as more solar equipment is deployed hand in hand with network equipment, whether it's for cellular or a lot of these low power wide area networks, we're seeing even satellite connectivity. Everyone's been excited about Starlink and other options that are coming, and that's good news for us, because bringing remote power to these sites is just as easy. The sun and the data are now coming from the sky above, so it's a great opportunity for a lot of equipment and innovation. So with those customizations, we hope to provide some great opportunities to support you on these products. So please be in touch with us, and our sales and product and application and tech support teams are here to help you out. Okay, that's the end of the presentation. So I will now refer back to our moderator, Mark McHenry. If we want to field some questions, we've got a fair amount of time left within the hour that we can do that.
Okay, great. Thanks, Brad. First question I'd like to pose to you is, what technical abilities does one need to use Zabbix SNMP with Morningstar products?
Okay, that's a good question. What I would say is for this scale, that having a moderate amount of IT experience would be useful, depending on what you want to take care of. If it's a completely green installation, we would recommend some IT support. If you're new to monitoring and you're looking to do this and you've got a big project at hand, reaching out for some technical support. This is a standard monitoring tool for a lot of office environments, so it's something that a lot of managed service providers and IT consulting firms are familiar with. But if you have some experience in hand already, it can be easily deployed using the versions that I talked about earlier, such as using an AWS image, and just in 5 minutes you can be logged into an account and have a server up and running, and then you just need to provide the hardware. And of course, Morningstar can provide some support on the connectivity side with the controllers. And in terms of learning the most about getting notifications and templates and everything set up from Zabbix, they would have excellent support resources on those topics as well.
Okay, great. Thanks for that. Another question here. When will Zabbix be available over the Modbus protocol for Morningstar products?
Okay. Let's see. Let me speak a little bit to that. And Sergey, you're welcome to jump in as well if you have any comment. I know that right now our implementation with Zabbix has been done exclusively with SNMP. That's the protocol we're using at this point in time. Our products also do support Modbus over IP. I know that there have been some third-party modules available as kind of add-on software packages for the Zabbix server that also do support Modbus. We have not taken that protocol as far as we have with the templates and formatting of SNMP, but it might be something that we're going to look at next. And it really depends on the application. SNMP being a lot of used in telecommunications and other networking equipment, Modbus being kind of an automation and energy management standard, there could be opportunities for both. So we hope to be taking a look at that in the coming months.
Okay, thanks for that question and answer. Next question, is the Morningstar EMC1 device firmware ready with firmware for SNMP to work with Zabbix out of the box?
Okay, a very good question. Currently, the SNMP software was a bit newer in terms of its release, and adding that agent to the software was done more recently in the past several months. What we do is we do provide a fully upgradable firmware for our products, and we can have available information on how to actually get that firmware and update the product. We always recommend looking at the EMC because we've got a pretty broad distribution network and the product is sold through many different channels and through different partners. So just like any software-based product, there's a chance that you may not have the most recent firmware on the hardware when you open the box. So we recommend taking a look at the version, and the newest firmware is available and pretty easy to install from our website. However, we do have production changes actually in place, and we hope to see that the SNMP version of the software will, be showing up in hardware, through distribution in the coming months. Okay, so that's always a challenge as hardware and software evolves rapidly. It takes a little bit of time to catch up through the distribution channels, but we've got a solution either way.
Okay, and a question coming in for Sergey. Scott asks, what operating systems does Zabbix run on?
If we're talking about Zabbix server, the Zabbix server can be installed on Linux machines, right? So Windows is not good for installation of Zabbix server. However, let's say Zabbix agents, they can be installed on any operating system. It's Windows, Linux, FreeBSD, IX, Solaris, and so on. So Zabbix, as I said, universal monitoring solution. So we work with all operating systems. But to install Zabbix as such, you would need, on the bare metal, right? You would need to have a Linux. But as Brad was mentioning, there is options also for virtual appliances. There are options for containers. So there are a lot of freedom on that.
Okay, very good. All right, and let's see. Cynthia is asking a question. Are you considering allowing a user to specify the SNMP community for security purposes instead of the default public?
I can address that question. The SNMP community is actually a value that is in the EMC itself, and it can be changed from the standard community to a custom value. Um, there is not necessarily the option to permanently modify that in the flash memory of the EMC. So during deployment, it can be changed so that you can use that as a configuration option for, a security access or other things. There is another security setting that can actually be enabled on the EMC, and that is the ability to disable flash. Sorry, basically memory writes to the controller, so that it could be put into a read-only version. Okay, so we have both a read-only hardware setting that can be done on the EMC using a dip switch setting, so that it can be used only for reading. Or if you do want to actually change that community setting, it can be done. It just would not be retained in non-volatile memory. So there's a possible option to, configure some of your communication settings also through Zabbix in terms of how you identify each of your sites. So, and if there's any more information we can provide on, questions like that, please get a hold of us offline, and we can provide more detail.
Okay, and this question I believe is for Sergey. Question is, which type of Linux is preferred? For example, CentOS, Ubuntu, which versions? Jeffrey's asking
Uh,
that question. Is that something you can answer, or is that
yeah,
something
yeah,
technical?
definitely. It's let's say there is no single recipe if we're talking about flavor, so it's completely up to you what you're familiar with. Let's say many of our engineers do it on CentOS. Some other prefer Ubuntu, and of course, if you are let's say a fan of Red Hat or anything else, it's completely up to you. There is no, let's say, better or Linux for Zabbix. We work completely on all flavors.
Okay, very good.
And I might comment too, one of the things we brought up in the past presentation too is the support of container services often, takes sometimes the operating system out of the discussion because it's able to be deployed as a container, and then you directly access, I guess it would be the runtime. Is that, Sergey? If you just want to run the application directly and not have to manage that. So there's a lot of different options for deployment.
Okay, very good. And Jeffrey asks, let's see, is this solution compatible with all desktops?
I would say, given that it's a web-based interface where you log into the software, Sergey, I guess, is there universal compatibility for browsers?
Yes, I think Chrome, Firefox, Internet Explorer, of all of the latest one are running fine. And if you want to open a Zabbix front end on your mobile, that would work as well, right? So it's completely up to you. And it's as Brad have mentioned, it's just web-based application, so uh, it's running smoothly almost everywhere.
Mhm.
Okay, very good. Another question here about the TriStar MPPT 60 amp controller. So uh, the TriStar MPPT 60 amp controller has an Ethernet port. So they're asking, is the EMC1 still required
Mhm.
with that
Okay,
controller? That's
yeah, I
for
can
Brad,
take
I
that.
suppose.
What we did was the TriStar MPPT, excuse me, was released in 2009 originally. It's a quite mature product and has been on the market, and it was one of the first charge controllers with Ethernet, and we supported Modbus IP from the start. It is a very high speed control, what we would call a bare metal installation, in that it's really managing the battery and has a kind of an Ethernet as an add-on chip to provide the connectivity. When we released the EMC1, we added a real-time operating system to that gateway. So it has a lot more capabilities for upgrades and better software support. And we're able to add things like Modbus or other protocols, as well as SNMP and the web interface to that RTOS that's running on the EMC. So for the most modern support for SNMP, you do require the EMC1 to be added to the TriStar PPT. And I know a lot of customers would like to see these types of solutions embedded in the products natively so that they don't have to buy an external gateway. And we are working on that in development where we can hopefully onboard more of that product. We just want to keep, the simplicity as well as the cost in check. And the one thing that's nice with EMC is it does work universally across our entire product line, but it does duplicate a little bit of the TriStar MPPT. Okay. So
Okay.
hopefully more changes in the future as we evolve the product line. But for now, the EMC1 is one of the lowest cost add-on gateways that gives you IP connectivity compared to a lot of competitors in the market, and we do that for that reason, so that it's low overhead.
Okay, well put. A couple of questions here about, do you need an EMC1 for each Morningstar product that you're monitoring?
Yes, at this time right now, it is a one-to-one relationship. It uses a serial link, so it's a serial RS-232 connection between the product that we're actually controlling and the EMC gateway, and it takes that interconnection and then provides an IP address on the WAN side of the network so that you can communicate it anywhere in the world. So at this point, it is a one-to-one relationship, but that's also something else we're looking for, the ability to be able to support multiple products, with a single gateway in the future.
Okay, I'm reading another question here. Let's see. In regards to MS View, how many devices can one monitor per workspace?
In MS View, if you if you get a chance to look at some of the handouts and you go back to the one slide on our comparison, there is an entry there for like the scale and the number of devices that we can actually support with these solutions. MS View was developed as a free software tool and utility that can provide some limited monitoring capabilities. I think when we pushed it, it got to about maybe 10 to 12 devices simultaneously. It can fairly reliably operate on and collect about 20 to 30 pieces of data from each device. But when you get to any kind of a higher level of communication, you really, it's not a server, it's just a PC software program that runs on Windows. When you get to a higher level of connectivity, that's when you really want to make the leap. And that was kind of the impetus for seeking uh, software partners such as Zabbix, because then you can scale to, hundreds of thousands of devices and many, many connections simultaneously, depending on bandwidth and server capabilities. So, sorry, long answer, but MS View, I would say 10 to 12 devices, maybe 20 pieces of data from each controller. Anything greater than that, and you're going to want to look for a more scalable third-party solution.
Okay, very good. And let's see, a question here from Daniel. Does the monitoring track amp hours in and amp hours out of the batteries? And I presume that's for Brad.
Yes, we do track the collective. It really depends on the device. And one of the things you can look at is each controller's template will show you exactly what values we do track. So I want to be careful I don't overstate, what the values are, but we have a pretty broad range of everything that's usually available in MS View is also available as uh, a, a value that can be pulled from the device as well. And we do have both kilowatt hour as well as amp hour um, input on a lot of the controllers. Again, it's specific to the controller, but that would allow you to measure harvested or collected energy from the PV array, as well as the number of amp hours that are going into the battery. And if the controller has a load connection, a load side to the product, such as a ProStar family product, you'll also see the amount of energy or amp hours that are pulled by the load as well. So there's some nuance to that. So I could follow up with you offline if you have further questions. But that's a key piece of information. How much energy am I collecting and generating? How much of it is going into the battery? And how much is my equipment drawing at the site? All three of those things everyone's going to want to know.
Okay, great. George has a question for both Brad and Sergey. Question is, does Morningstar or Zabbix have offices or shops in Africa?
I can answer for
Go
Zabbix
first.
that at this moment we don't have offices. To our regret, in Africa, we do have, I think, one partner in South Africa, but that's it. And Brad.
Mhm. We don't have any physical locations at the time. However, I've been to Africa many times. We have distributors all over the country, and it's a very key market for us in terms of support. So I apologize, we don't have a physical presence yet or an office space, but we can easily support you remotely, and would definitely want to learn more about any applications that are there, and get you not only connected with a Morningstar distributor if you need product support, but also take care of some of your software needs. We have a very technical sales team, an applications team, and our tech support team, and we're well versed not only in our products but in a lot of the common applications in these markets. So definitely give us a shout.
Okay, great. So for George and anyone else, yes, we've been supporting customers in Africa for many, many years. So great question. Let's see. Next question. Is there a limitation of solar panel vendors to use Morningstar SNMP module?
Was that, you said, a limitation on
Yeah,
the?
I'm just going to read the question exactly as I wrote it. Sorry, let me read it again. Is there a limitation of solar panel vendors to use Morningstar SNMP module? I think
Okay.
they're
I,
picking up the word module
I,
here a little bit.
yeah, I can infer a few things from that. The SNMP is a pretty universal option or accessory for all of our data-enabled products from the slide I showed before. In terms of solar module selection, it does not have any impact on the data connectivity at all. As long as the solar module is within the operating voltage range and power ranges of the solar controller, we can work with, I'd say, almost any modules, with the exception of a few that are maybe special for utility or very unique. I could take the time now to point out that Morningstar has a string calculator, also a web-based tool on our website with over 100,000 modules, specifications pre-formatted into a database. And if you choose the module that you are using and you select a Morningstar controller, we will give you both feedback on the compatibility as well as the configuration options and many other checks. So for module sizing, take a look at our string calculator, and SNMP would not be impacted by your choice there.
Okay. Hey, great question coming in from Scott for both Sergey and Brad. He's asking, does Zabbix operate in SNMP version 1, 2, and 3?
I'll take that first, and then Sergey, maybe you can talk about the versions of SNMP you support, which I believe is broader than what our hardware supports. The current version that we have of SNMP in our hardware right now is version 2C. Okay, this seemed to be the most commonly used application. It does not support a direct encrypted connection, which is sometimes common on SNMP version 3 and up. So we support version 2C right now in our hardware. However, I'll let Sergey speak to what types of support he has in his software for maybe other devices.
Yeah, Zabbix will support all three versions. The only thing that we usually ask customers to think about, version 3 is great in terms of the security, but that has a certain impact on, let's say, performance, right? And not performance of the Zabbix itself, but as well as, let's say, responsiveness of the SNMP agent installed on the device. So this is the only thing to take into consideration.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, I might just add one more thing. When we talked to a lot of applications and markets, and 2C was preferred in a lot of these equipment, because what we found was a lot of customers were doing this on sometimes private networks or VPN type connections, meaning it was not available on the public internet, but there's no reason that it can't be. And they were using transport-based encryption. But as Sergey said, it has an impact. When you encrypt the data, you lose a little bit of your capacity, so you have to keep that in mind. So.
Okay, we've had a couple questions here about, could you discuss the difference between SNMP polling and traps? So Brad,
Okay.
do you want to take that one? And
yeah, let me talk about on our hardware, and then if there maybe some trap support features Sergey could speak to. On our products, this was a request for a long time, and I just want to be clear that we early on supported only the ability of the TriStar MPPT, since it was the first product we featured with Ethernet, to, in addition to sending email notifications directly from the controller, to send SNMP traps. So a trap notification is sent to a trap server, and it's an instant alert when there's a condition that is met in the TriStar. This was all done in the TriStar itself. Okay, and it was a bit limited, lack of encryption. You can only do 4 types of notifications. What we've since done is move to the platform we talked about today, where any of the values can be pulled by, or when I say pulled, POLL, a polling mechanism that requests data and actually collects it from the TriStar directly into the database of the Zabbix NMS. With that information available, all of these triggers, probably limitless, can be set up and configured to give you notifications at the server level. So we didn't continue to develop the trap notification in the TriStar PBT, and instead we defer more to the server to do that kind of collecting of data and then instant notification. Okay. And Sergey, is there trap functionality within the server as well from Zabbix?
Yeah, Zabbix can do both. So we can do polling, we can do trapping. So it's completely up to the particular, let's say, application of our software, and so the customer may choose.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's a lot more hardware capability once you've got a server running the equipment in terms of all that it can manage. So we moved to a bit of a remote application and kept the controller hardware fairly simple and efficient and reliable. And a lot of these data features though on the server add a lot of value.
Okay, I see another good question coming in here. Is there any ability to add extra monitored data such as environmental temperature? That's for both of you, if you want to chime in.
That is, we do not have any kind of auxiliary or programmable I/O on our products that can kind of be added for customization. It's really centered around the data set of values that are specifically monitored by the controller: current, voltage, temperature of the product, temperature of the heat sink and the battery. Those are kind of preset. So we don't have any kind of open choices. However, I don't have specific examples to cite, but I do know that there are SNMP enabled products on the market that can be set up for this type of application that are used for remote monitoring. And if they support SNMP, then I would be willing to bet they could be programmed into the Zabbix software. Because then you're outside of Morningstar scope and you're into the world of SNMP, and I have seen these products on the market. So
what I want probably to add is Zabbix, I think version 5.2 started to support also IoT devices. So through the MQTT protocol. So again, if you have this island installation, or let's say you're completely offsite, then in this case, you just can add a sensor that would be reading temperature or any other environmental or parameters, and that would just push them or would be readable by Zabbix. So in this case, you can, in my imagination, never installed any solar panels in the desert, but in this case, you can basically correlate that you have the level of the temperature from the side. You have maybe a solar radiation metered, and then you can understand whether your panel is given what it's expected to give. So just plenty of opportunities.
Okay, great. Let's see, another question here. Does Zabbix have an active standby capability on the Zabbix server? Does it have an active
is
and
this
or
like a high
standby?
availability? You think that's what they're asking, maybe, Sergey?
Okay, yeah. Let's say it's not.
Yes, that's what he's asking.
Okay. So this is not a feature that comes out of the box. If we're talking about active installation, or let's say Zabbix itself is a standalone installation. You can easily set up Zabbix in the active passive mode. It doesn't really require a lot or in-depth technical knowledge. If you really want to have, let's say, a high availability close to active, that would require, let's say, a certain knowledge and experience with, let's say, databases. At the same time, if it's really important for you, let's say, the one solution that I know coming out of the box is a solution from MySQL Oracle, right? So they have, let's say, a database that would be able to replicate data across different points, and would actually create this high availability in together with the Zabbix. But that's a very interesting technical question, and I'm ready to discuss it later. You can contact me, and I can give you different examples of how different customers set this up. And it's, of course, based on what you want to reach.
Yeah, I
Okay,
don't know
very
how
good.
too you have your AWS marketplace settings as well, but I know depending on how those configured, sometimes you can also get, like a multi-availability zone, through the Amazon. Like if it's an EC2 container, that's something else they can offer. So there's a lot of options there.
Okay, great question coming in for Brad. Can you use a third-party multiple RS-232 to Ethernet gateway with MSView for monitoring multiple Morningstar products at a single site? For example, 4.
Yes, if you're using MSView and you have a PC and you have multiple COM ports, either an RS-45 adapter with different addresses, or even multiple, for instance, 4 serial ports, one-to-one serial ports. Those would show up within the device manager of Windows as COM 1, 2, 3, and 4. You can connect to multiple TriStar or any Morningstar controller that supports serial using those multiple COM devices. So yeah, you can support multiples that way. They could be on a 45 network. You'd have to change the IDs. And then, of course, if you have individual IP addresses, such as we have in our office here, we've got several TriStars on our local area network with different IPs. We can monitor all of them at the same time within MSView. Okay, but again, MSView, 2, 4 devices, maybe a dozen at the most, is within its capabilities. Anything beyond that, you would need to change platforms.
Okay, very good. And here's a question for Sergey. What DB engines does Zabbix use?
Okay, Zabbix works with MySQL, with Oracle, and with PostgreSQL. And when we're talking about MySQL, it's actually all kind of, again, flavors. It could be Maria, it could be Percona, it could be anything that is compatible with, let's say, the structure of MySQL.
Okay, very good. A question here for Brad. Are there any Morningstar recommended data loggers for MSView Modbus connections?
Let's see, a data logger. Well, one capability of MSView is once you establish a connection, you can view the data in real time. You can deploy configuration changes to the settings using MSView. But the third feature is there is some simple logging capabilities that are also built into the product. You have to have a dedicated connection and you've got to have a PC running at to collect the data. It's not server based, it would run right within Windows. But you can set up a ability to capture a log file over a period of time. I think for long-term collection of data, I would not recommend it. But for short time, we've used it within our lab to monitor 2, 3 days of very detailed data from a product for testing purposes. And then there's some graphing functionality that's built in, but it's for more short-term and lab diagnostic use rather than multi-year, multi-site monitoring. Okay, but it is possible, and you can set the interval to is as short as a few seconds. The export, it does not support a database. It would export this data into a CSV file, which can be read by most spreadsheet programs. It's useful.
Okay, very good. And this question, I believe, is for Brad, but maybe both. Um, is the serial bus baud rate limited? Is there a specific brand for USB compatibility?
For most of our products, we have tested several USB to RS-232 hardware converters. That give you a USB port because we know that serial is not on a lot of PCs. Those are generally compatible, although some work better than others. You could contact us. We could give you a recommendation. We've had them available for many years. Um, and in terms of the baud rate, I need to refresh my memory, and our tech support team would be able to provide this off the bat. I believe it is 9600 baud for the communications, but I would have to check with that offline. Okay, but I know that generally the baud rate is customizable. We've had no trouble using USB to 232 adapters with MSView, so we could give you some recommendations there. A lot
Okay.
of times we use 232 connections directly with other hardware, such as I showed in my presentation, oil and gas automation equipment. They would have these ports, but many laptops, there's not much room for anything more than a USB 3 port now, so they're getting very thin. So we provide adapter support.
Okay, I think we have time for just 2 more questions, and then we got to cut out because we're well past the hour. but thanks for all these questions. Let's see. Terry's asking, would the Zabbix solution be suitable for extremely low data situations? For example, less than 50 megabytes per year. I guess that would be for Sergey or Brad.
Do I understand correctly? It's like whether if the amount of data collected is very small, whether Zabbix would be useful or
it says, would Zabbix solution be suitable for extremely low data situations? And he says, for example, less than 50 megabytes per year.
I don't see the reason why not. It's depends, of course, on the hardware that you are using, or let's say virtual resources that you are using to run Zabbix. So if it's not overkill for your, let's say, IT budget in terms of running a machine, then I would say that it's not a problem. Depends also on your business task. If this is a mission critical application that you are monitoring. It's definitely worth doing it.
Mm-hmm. I can comment too that it's a bit of an installation to get everything configured, and that would be an easy job for the database. But there are a lot of applications where you don't really need a lot of data, but you need to know that the data is real, and you got to collect it from the site in order to make sure that the system is up. For instance, pinging a site once per day just to make sure that the health is good and that the product is is healthy and doing its job, serving the needs of the load. So for very low data applications, also, we have worked with a lot of restricted bandwidth connections, 2G modems. If you have metered connections or are paying for connectivity that's cellular or even satellite based, you may not have a lot of data to work with, but that doesn't mean it can't provide a lot of value even with a single data point a day for a number of sites. So I would say go for it if you want to make the installation of Zabbix.
Okay, and last question. Does your solution behave well over VNC connections to a server? I guess that's for both Sergey and Brad.
A VNC connection, I have to check the acronym, but is that maybe a virtual network connection?
I think that's what they're talking about, a virtual network connection.
I have to check my IT terminology. I mean, if you're in a cloud database, I think your network connectivity options are pretty limitless, right, Sergey? I wouldn't think that there'd be any limit for any kind of virtual connection as long as it's set up correctly, right?
Yeah, again, I'm not that super technical at all, but if there is a connectivity, we don't really, let's say, it doesn't really matter what how did you establish that?
Yeah, I mean, when we've looked at like vendor offered solutions that are software as a service, like from our competitors and such, versus what this is, which is a private instance that you can put anywhere on your own server or in the cloud. That's a lot of the advantage of using this type of solution, because if you can configure it, you can put it in your office, you can open up to the internet or not. You could only connect a private network to it, meaning that it's not available to the general internet, and it's kept just on a private system. A lot of applications we work with, really enterprise grade deployments or oil and gas applications where they have certain security requirements, they'll choose a solution like this to keep the server only within their private network, and they'll manage it this way so that they can meet their security requirements. So it's fully capable of doing that.
Okay. Well, hey, at this point, I think we'd like to thank everybody. We did get to most of the questions here. There's just a couple that we weren't able to hit upon, so we'll take them offline. But at this point, I'd like to thank Sergey, thank Brad for a great presentation, and terrific questions that really came in. Really, we had a lot of interest here. So we'll see you next time, and this concludes the broadcast. Take care.
Okay. Thanks, everyone. Thank you, Sergey.